Before the sun rises over the medieval town, while most people are still asleep behind thick wooden doors and stone walls, you are already awake, standing at the edge of a narrow street with a wooden shovel resting against your shoulder and a cloth tied tightly around your mouth. The air is cold, but the smell rising from beneath the street is warm, heavy, and impossible to ignore. You are not a soldier, a merchant, a knight, or a craftsman whose work will ever be admired in a grand hall. You are a sewer worker, one of the men responsible for entering the places that almost everyone else refuses to think about. Beneath the streets of the medieval town is another world, a hidden network of drains, channels, pits, cesspools, and underground passages carrying away everything people no longer want to see. Waste from houses, workshops, markets, inns, and animals eventually finds its way into these dark places. And when the channels become blocked, someone has to go down and clear them. That someone is you. There is no ceremony when you begin your workday. Nobody rings a bell for you. Nobody gathers in a square to watch. There is no noble title attached to the occupation and no promise of glory waiting at the end. Your reward is simply that the town continues functioning because you were willing to enter the filth beneath it. You walk toward the first drainage opening as the sky slowly begins to brighten, passing merchants who are preparing their stalls and servants carrying baskets toward wealthy homes. They barely notice you. Perhaps they smell you before they see you. You have learned to keep your distance from people whenever possible because the odor of your work clings to your clothes, your boots, your hair, and even your skin. Soap can remove some of it, but never all. The master responsible for the drainage crew is already waiting beside the opening. He tells you that a channel near the market has become blocked during the night. Several shopkeepers have complained that dirty water is no longer flowing away properly, and the town authorities want it cleared before the market becomes busy. You look down into the opening. Darkness waits below. A narrow stream of foul water moves slowly through the channel, carrying scraps of food, mud, animal waste, and other material that should have disappeared but has become trapped. The master hands you a rope and a wooden tool. You wrap the rope around your waist and prepare to descend. The opening is narrow, and the stone around it is wet and slippery. You lower yourself carefully, placing your feet against the wall while another worker holds the rope from above. The smell becomes stronger immediately. You try not to breathe deeply. The cloth covering your mouth does almost nothing. It is more psychological protection than actual protection, but you keep it there anyway because imagining that it helps is better than nothing. Your boots touch the bottom. Cold water surrounds them. You look ahead. The passage is barely wide enough for your shoulders. The ceiling is low enough that you cannot stand completely upright. Water moves slowly around your ankles. In places it reaches your knees. The walls are covered with moisture and dark growth. There is almost no light except the small lantern attached to your belt. You begin moving forward. Every step is uncertain because you cannot see what lies beneath the water. A piece of broken pottery could be waiting beneath the surface. A sharp piece of metal, a stone, a dead animal. Anything could injure your foot. You move slowly, using the wooden tool to test the ground ahead. The sound of your footsteps echoes through the narrow passage. Above you, the medieval town continues its morning routine. People are opening shutters. Bakers are preparing bread. Horses are being led through the streets. Children are being sent on errands. Nobody thinks about the man walking through the darkness beneath their feet. That is the strange truth of your occupation. The more successful you are, the less people notice you. If the drainage system works, nobody cares. If the streets remain dry and waste disappears, people assume that is simply how the town functions. Only when something goes wrong does anyone remember that someone must fix it. You continue toward the blockage. After several minutes, you find it. A mass of waste, mud, straw, cloth, and broken material has become packed into the channel. Water is collecting behind it. The pressure is slowly increasing. If the blockage remains, the dirty water may overflow into the streets. You begin pulling the material apart with your wooden tool. The work is harder than it looks. The mass is heavy because it has absorbed water and mud. You pull once. Nothing. You pull again. Piece breaks free. The smell becomes almost unbearable. You turn your head and breathe through your mouth, but that does little to help. You continue. Piece by piece, the blockage begins to loosen. Suddenly, the water behind it surges forward. You stumble backward and catch yourself against the wall. Dirty water rushes past your boots and hits your legs. You hold onto the stone until the flow becomes weaker. The channel begins draining again. You have done what you were sent to do, but the work is not finished. You must inspect the passage to make sure another blockage is not forming farther ahead. You continue through the darkness. The tunnel becomes narrower. You crouch lower. Your back begins to ache almost immediately. You wonder how many hours people could tolerate this work before their bodies began to change. You already know the answer because your own body has begun changing. Your shoulders are stronger, but your knees hurt. Your hands are rough. Your skin is often irritated from contact with dirty water. Small cuts take longer to heal. Every injury is dangerous because the places you work are filled with things that can cause infection. There are no modern gloves, no protective suits, no clean underground stations. Your clothing is your only barrier, and it is already soaked. You continue anyway because stopping does not make the work disappear. Eventually, you reach a larger chamber beneath the market district. Here, the drainage channels meet. The chamber is darker and warmer than the passage. The ceiling rises enough for you to stand, but the air is heavy and still. You lift the lantern and look around. There are piles of accumulated material along the edges. Someone will have to remove them eventually, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps weeks from now. You wonder how long it took for the town to create this underground world. The streets above are built from stone and wood, but beneath them lies the hidden consequence of daily life. People eat. Animals live beside them. Workshops produce waste. Markets produce spoiled food. Houses produce dirty water. Every day, more material enters the drainage system. The town is constantly producing something that nobody wants to see, and you are one of the people responsible for making it disappear. You begin clearing the chamber. The work is slower here because there is more material. You shovel it into a wooden container that another worker will eventually pull toward the surface. Your movements become repetitive. Push, lift, turn, empty. Push, lift, turn, empty. The lantern flickers beside you. You can hear water dripping from the ceiling. Occasionally something moves in the darkness. You stop and listen. It may be a rat. There are plenty of them down here. They live among the waste because it provides everything they need. Food, water, shelter. You are not particularly afraid of rats anymore. You are more concerned about what else might be living in the darkness. You continue working. After several hours, your stomach begins to growl. You have brought a small piece of bread with you, but you do not want to eat it here. You have learned not to eat underground if you can avoid it. Your hands are dirty despite the cloth wrapped around them, and there is no clean water nearby. You decide to wait. Hunger is easier to tolerate than sickness. Eventually, you return toward the surface. Before the sun rises over the medieval town, while most people are still asleep behind thick wooden doors and stone walls, you are already awake, standing at the edge of a narrow street with a wooden shovel resting against your shoulder and a cloth tied tightly around your mouth. The air is cold, but the smell rising from beneath the street is warm, heavy, and impossible to ignore. You are not a soldier, a merchant, a knight, or a craftsman whose work will ever be admired in a grand hall. You are a sewer worker, one of the men responsible for entering the places that almost everyone else refuses to think about. Beneath the streets of the medieval town is another world, a hidden network of drains, channels, pits, cesspools, and underground passages carrying away everything people no longer want to see. Waste from houses, workshops, markets, inns, and animals eventually finds its way into these dark places. And when the channels become blocked, someone has to go down and clear them. That someone is you. There is no ceremony when you begin your workday. Nobody rings a bell for you. Nobody gathers in a square to watch. There is no noble title attached to the occupation and no promise of glory waiting at the end. Your reward is simply that the town continues functioning because you were willing to enter the filth beneath it. You walk toward the first drainage opening as the sky slowly begins to brighten, passing merchants who are preparing their stalls and servants carrying baskets toward wealthy homes. They barely notice you. Perhaps they smell you before they see you. You have learned to keep your distance from people whenever possible because the odor of your work clings to your clothes, your boots, your hair, and even your skin. Soap can remove some of it, but never all. The master responsible for the drainage crew is already waiting beside the opening. He tells you that a channel near the market has become blocked during the night. Several shopkeepers have complained that dirty water is no longer flowing away properly, and the town authorities want it cleared before the market becomes busy. You look down into the opening. Darkness waits below. A narrow stream of foul water moves slowly through the channel, carrying scraps of food, mud, animal waste, and other material that should have disappeared but has become trapped. The master hands you a rope and a wooden tool. You wrap the rope around your waist and prepare to descend. The opening is narrow, and the stone around it is wet and slippery. You lower yourself carefully, placing your feet against the wall while another worker holds the rope from above. Your boots touch the bottom. Cold water surrounds them. You look ahead. The passage is barely wide enough for your shoulders. The ceiling is low enough that you cannot stand completely upright. Water moves slowly around your ankles. In places it reaches your knees. The walls are covered with moisture and dark growth. There is almost no light except the small lantern attached to your belt. You begin moving forward. Every step is uncertain because you cannot see what lies beneath the water. A piece of broken pottery could be waiting beneath the surface. A sharp piece of metal, a stone, a dead animal. Anything could injure your foot. You move slowly, using the wooden tool to test the ground ahead. The sound of your footsteps echoes through the narrow passage. Above you, the medieval town continues its morning routine. People are opening shutters. Bakers are preparing bread. Horses are being led through the streets. Children are being sent on errands. Nobody thinks about the man walking through the darkness beneath their feet. That is the strange truth of your occupation. The more successful you are, the less people notice you. If the drainage system works, nobody cares. If the streets remain dry and waste disappears, people assume that is simply how the town functions. Only when something goes wrong does anyone remember that someone must fix it. You continue toward the blockage. After several minutes, you find it. A mass of waste, mud, straw, cloth, and broken material has become packed into the channel. Water is collecting behind it. The pressure is slowly increasing. If the blockage remains, the dirty water may overflow into the streets. You begin pulling the material apart with your wooden tool. The work is harder than it looks. The mass is heavy because it has absorbed water and mud. You pull once. Nothing. You pull again. Piece breaks free. The smell becomes almost unbearable. You turn your head and breathe through your mouth, but that does little to help. You continue. Piece by piece, the blockage begins to loosen. Suddenly, the water behind it surges forward. You stumble backward and catch yourself against the wall. Dirty water rushes past your boots and hits your legs. You hold onto the stone until the flow becomes weaker. The channel begins draining again. You have done what you were sent to do, but the work is not finished. You must inspect the passage to make sure another blockage is not forming farther ahead. You continue through the darkness. The tunnel becomes narrower. You crouch lower. Your back begins to ache almost immediately. You wonder how many hours people could tolerate this work before their bodies began to change. You already know the answer because your own body has begun changing. Your shoulders are stronger, but your knees hurt. Your hands are rough. Your skin is often irritated from contact with dirty water. Small cuts take longer to heal. Every injury is dangerous because the places you work are filled with things that can cause infection. There are no modern gloves, no protective suits, no clean underground stations. Your clothing is your only barrier, and it is already soaked. You continue anyway because stopping does not make the work disappear. Eventually, you reach a larger chamber beneath the market district. Here, the drainage channels meet. The chamber is darker and warmer than the passage. The ceiling rises enough for you to stand, but the air is heavy and still. You lift the lantern and look around. There are piles of accumulated material along the edges. Someone will have to remove them eventually, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps weeks from now. You wonder how long it took for the town to create this underground world. The streets above are built from stone and wood, but beneath them lies the hidden consequence of daily life. People eat. Animals live beside them. Workshops produce waste. Markets produce spoiled food. Houses produce dirty water. Every day, more material enters the drainage system. The town is constantly producing something that nobody wants to see, and you are one of the people responsible for making it disappear. You begin clearing the chamber. The work is slower here because there is more material. You shovel it into a wooden container that another worker will eventually pull toward the surface. Your movements become repetitive. Push, lift, turn, empty, push, lift, turn, empty. The lantern flickers beside you. You can hear water dripping from the ceiling. Occasionally something moves in the darkness. You stop and listen. It may be a rat. There are plenty of them down here. They live among the waste because it provides everything they need. Food, water, shelter. You are not particularly afraid of rats anymore. You are more concerned about what else might be living in the darkness. You continue working. After several hours, your stomach begins to growl. You have brought a small piece of bread with you, but you do not want to eat it here. You have learned not to eat underground if you can avoid it. Your hands are dirty despite the cloth wrapped around them, and there is no clean water nearby. You decide to wait. Hunger is easier to tolerate than sickness. Eventually, you return toward the surface. The worker above pulls the rope while you climb. When your head finally appears above the opening, sunlight hits your eyes. You blink repeatedly. The world above seems almost unreal after hours underground. People walk through. The second day begins before sunrise, and by now you already know that the smell will reach you before the darkness of the underground channels does. You arrive at the drainage yard while the streets are still almost empty, carrying the same wooden tools you used yesterday. Your boots are still damp from the previous day's work, and no matter how carefully you wash them, the odor remains trapped in the leather. You consider asking for another pair, but you already know the answer. Good leather is expensive, and nobody is going to waste it on a sewer worker. You tighten the cloth around your mouth and walk toward the master, who is standing beside a small wooden cart. He tells you that there has been another complaint, this time from a row of houses near the butcher's quarter. The drainage channel behind the houses has stopped flowing, and dirty water has begun collecting in the street. The residents are angry because the smell is becoming unbearable. The master tells you that you will inspect it first, then decide how many workers are needed. You take your lantern and rope and follow the narrow street toward the houses. The medieval town is already beginning to wake. Bakers are carrying baskets of bread, merchants are opening shutters, and animals are being led toward the market. People step around the dirty water without wanting to look at it. Some complain loudly about the smell. Others blame the butchers. Nobody talks about the drainage workers who will eventually have to enter the channel and remove the problem. When you reach the access point, you kneel beside the opening and lift the wooden cover. The smell immediately becomes stronger. A dark stream of water moves slowly beneath the street. You lower your lantern and inspect the passage. It is almost completely blocked. The water is barely moving, and a thick layer of mud has collected along the bottom. You tell the master that you will need help. 2 other workers arrive with ropes, buckets, and wooden tools. You descend first because you are the most experienced. The moment your boots touch the bottom, you feel cold water running around your ankles. You move forward slowly, keeping one hand against the wall. The passage is narrower than the one you entered yesterday. Your shoulders brush against the wet stone as you walk. The lantern creates a small circle of light, but everything beyond it remains black. You hear dripping water and the distant movement of something ahead. You stop and listen. A rat suddenly runs across the passage in front of you and disappears into a crack in the wall. You barely react. After years of working underground, rats are no longer surprising. What concerns you is the possibility of disease. You have heard stories of workers becoming sick after spending too much time in contaminated water. Some recover, others do not. There is no physician waiting underground to save you if something goes wrong. You simply hope your body is strong enough to survive whatever you encounter. You continue forward until you reach the main blockage. It is worse than you expected. The channel is filled with animal waste, scraps of meat, bones, straw, mud, and pieces of cloth. The butcher's quarter has been sending more waste into the drainage system than it can handle. You stare at the blockage and realize that clearing it will take most of the day. You begin with the wooden shovel. The first layer is thick and difficult to remove. You push the shovel beneath it and lift. The material is heavy. You place it into the bucket behind you. Another worker pulls the bucket toward the surface. You repeat the process, again and again. Push, lift, fill, pull, empty. The work is slow because there is barely enough space to move. Sweat begins forming beneath your clothes despite the cold water around your feet. Your back starts to ache. You shift your position and continue. Above you, the town becomes louder. You can hear carts rolling over the street. Occasionally, you hear voices through the stone above. Someone is shouting at a merchant. Someone is laughing. Someone is calling for a child. Their ordinary lives continue while you work beneath them. After several hours, you finally break through the first section of the blockage. Water suddenly begins moving faster. You step backward as it rushes toward you. The current carries pieces of waste past your legs. One of your workers curses as dirty water splashes across his face. He wipes his eyes and continues. You tell him to be careful, but there is little else you can do. The channel is beginning to clear, but another blockage appears farther ahead. You move toward it. This one is smaller, but it has become tightly packed between two stones. You use the wooden tool to loosen it. The tool slips. Your hand strikes the wall. Pain shoots through your fingers. You look down and see a deep cut across your knuckle. Blood mixes with the dirty water almost immediately. You wrap a piece of cloth around the wound. There is no time to leave. The blockage must be removed. You continue working with one hand. Every movement hurts, but you force yourself to keep going. Eventually, the stone loosens and the water begins flowing again. You stand still for a moment and listen. The sound of moving water is almost pleasant compared with the silence that existed before. You know the channel is finally functioning. But when you look at your injured hand, you also know the day has become more dangerous. A cut in clean water is one thing. A cut in filthy water is something else entirely. You climb back to the surface. The sunlight is painful after so many hours underground. The master examines your hand and tells you to wash it immediately. He gives you clean water from a small container, and you pour it over the wound. It burns badly. You grit your teeth. One of the other workers tells you that his brother lost 2 fingers after an infection from a similar wound. You say nothing. You have heard enough stories like that. The master wraps the injury and tells you to continue only if you feel able. You look at the street. The dirty water has almost disappeared. People are already returning to their normal routines. A woman opens the door of her house and looks outside. She sees that the street is cleaner and seems satisfied. She does not ask who fixed it. She simply closes the door again. You almost laugh. The town has a strange relationship with the people who clean it. Everyone wants the result. Nobody wants to know what it took to achieve it. Before you can rest, the master gives you another assignment. A wealthy merchant has complained about a blocked drainage pit behind his warehouse. He wants it cleared immediately because he is expecting a shipment. You wonder how one man can have so many problems with waste. But you know that wealthy households and merchants often produce enormous amounts of refuse. The master tells you that this time you will take 3 workers. The 4 of you carry the equipment across town. The merchant's warehouse is large, built from stone and heavy timber, with carts and barrels stacked outside. The merchant himself stands near the entrance wearing clean clothing that seems almost ridiculous compared with your filthy work clothes. He explains the problem impatiently. Water has been collecting behind the warehouse, and he is afraid it will damage his goods. He wants the work completed before his shipment arrives. You ask whether he has allowed anyone to inspect the drainage recently. He says no. You tell him that this is probably part of the problem. He looks annoyed. You do not care. Your job is not to flatter him. Your job is to fix what he refuses to see. Behind the warehouse is a stone-covered access point. You remove the cover and immediately understand why the water has stopped. The pit is almost full. Years of waste have accumulated below. There is barely enough room for the water to move. You look down and realize that this will be one of the worst jobs you have ever done. The master hesitates for a moment before telling you to begin. You lower the rope and climb down. The chamber is larger than the previous channels, but the air is worse. The walls are slick. The third day begins with pain in your hand and a stiffness in your back that makes even the simplest movements uncomfortable. You wake before sunrise, but for a few moments you remain still, staring at the wooden ceiling and wondering whether you can afford to stay in bed. The wound on your hand has swollen slightly during the night, and every time you move your fingers, a sharp pain travels through them. You know that you should probably rest, but rest is a luxury that your occupation rarely allows. If you do not work, you do not get paid, and if you do not get paid, food becomes a problem very quickly. You wrap the wound tightly with a strip of cloth, pull on your work clothes, and step outside into the cold morning air. The streets are still quiet, but the smell of the town is already beginning to rise. Waste from the previous day has collected in gutters and drainage channels, and small streams of dirty water run between the stones. You walk toward the work yard where the master is waiting. He looks at your hand and immediately notices the swelling. He asks whether you can work. You tell him yes. He studies you for a moment but does not argue. He simply hands you a list of locations that need inspection. The first is a drainage channel near a row of workshops. The second is a public waste pit close to the market. The third is an old underground passage that has reportedly collapsed. You look at the list and realize that this will be another long day. The first location seems simple enough. A drainage channel behind several workshops has begun overflowing into the street. When you arrive, you find water spilling between the stones. The workshops nearby include a butcher, a leather worker, and a small dyeing operation. Each produces its own kind of waste, and all of it eventually ends up in the same drainage system. The leather worker complains that the smell is making his customers leave. The butcher complains that the water is attracting animals. The dyer complains that the dirty water is damaging the area around his workshop. Everyone has a complaint, and everyone expects you to solve it. You remove the access cover and lower the lantern. The channel below is almost completely filled with mud. You descend carefully. Your injured hand makes the rope difficult to grip, so you ask another worker to secure it while you climb down. The passage is colder than the air above. You walk through shallow water until you reach the first blockage. It is not waste this time, but mud and sediment that have accumulated over many months. You begin scraping it away. The work is repetitive but less dangerous than the previous day. Still, your hand throbs every time you use the wooden tool. You try to compensate by using your other hand, but this makes your shoulder ache. After an hour, the blockage begins to loosen. Water starts flowing again. You continue for another hour to make sure the channel is clear. When you finally return to the surface, the workshop owners are waiting. They immediately notice that the water is moving. One of them thanks you. Another simply walks away. You do not expect much gratitude. You have learned that people are more interested in whether the problem has disappeared than in who made it disappear. You collect your tools and move toward the market. The second assignment is much worse. The public waste pit has not been emptied for weeks. It is located behind a row of stalls where people sell vegetables, meat, bread, and other goods. The pit is covered by a wooden structure, but the smell escapes through every opening. As you approach, several merchants cover their noses. One man tells you that customers have stopped standing near his stall. Another says that the authorities should have dealt with it sooner. You look at the pit and understand that there is no quick solution. The master tells you that the waste must be removed in stages. You and 3 other workers begin preparing the ropes and containers. There is no pleasant way to do this work. You open the cover and immediately feel the heat rising from below. The waste has been collecting for a long time, and decomposition has made the pit warm. You secure the rope and climb down. The air becomes thick almost immediately. Your eyes begin to water. You keep the cloth over your mouth and try to breathe slowly. The material below is a mixture of everything the market has discarded. Rotten vegetables, animal waste, straw, broken pottery, mud, food scraps, pieces of cloth, bones. Everything that people do not want above ground eventually ends up here. You begin filling the containers. The worker above pulls them out one by one. The work is painfully slow. You shovel. The container fills. You signal. It rises. Another empty container comes down. You repeat the process. Hours pass. The market above becomes crowded. You can hear voices through the wooden cover. Customers bargain over prices. Merchants shout about their goods. Children run between stalls. Somewhere above you, a musician begins playing. The sound reaches you faintly through the walls. It is almost absurd. Above ground, people are laughing and buying food. Below ground, you are standing waist deep in the remains of everything they have thrown away. You continue working. At midday, your stomach begins to hurt from hunger, but you do not stop. You cannot eat here. You think about the bread waiting at home and imagine its smell. The thought gives you enough strength to continue. One of the workers beside you slips and falls. He catches himself against the wall, but his leg disappears into the sludge. You pull him free. He is furious and frightened. You tell him to be more careful. He looks at you and says that he hates this work. You tell him that everyone does. He laughs bitterly. For a moment, the two of you stand silently. There is nothing else to say. Nobody dreams of becoming a sewer worker. Most people enter because they need money, because their family already works in the occupation, or because there are few other jobs available. You are not here because you love it. You are here because someone has to do it. By afternoon, the pit has been lowered enough that the workers can finally see the stone floor beneath the waste. You feel a small sense of victory. The master tells you to continue until the remaining material is removed. You keep shoveling. Your injured hand is now painful enough that you can barely close it. You wrap another piece of cloth around the existing bandage. The wound has begun to bleed again. You consider telling the master, but you know what he will say. He will tell you to rest. Then he will assign your work to someone else. You cannot afford to lose the day's pay, so you keep working. When the final container is pulled from the pit, you climb out slowly. The sunlight is bright and warm. You stand beside the opening and breathe deeply. Even the ordinary smell of the market seems pleasant compared with what you have been breathing underground. The merchants immediately begin using the space around the pit again. One of them thanks the master. Another asks whether the pit will stay clean for long. You almost laugh. Nothing stays clean for long in a medieval town. The pit will begin filling again tomorrow. You wash your hands and look at the market. People are eating. They are buying meat and bread. Children are carrying fruit. A woman is choosing vegetables. The scene looks normal, yet you know what happens behind the stalls. The medieval town is built around a constant cycle of consumption and waste. Food enters. Waste leaves. Water enters. Dirty water leaves. Animals arrive. Their waste accumulates. People live. People die. Everything eventually becomes something that must be removed. Your work exists at the end of that cycle. You are the person standing where everyone else wants to look away. After a short rest, the master takes you toward the third assignment. The collapsed passage is outside the main market district. According to the report, a section of the underground drainage system has caved in, blocking water from several houses. If the fourth day begins with rain, and in a medieval town, rain is never simply rain for someone who works beneath the streets. You wake to the sound of water striking the roof, and before you even leave your bed, you already know that the workday will be worse than usual. Heavy rain means the gutters will fill, the streets will become muddy, and every drainage channel beneath the town will be carrying more water than normal. For ordinary people, rain may mean staying indoors, covering goods at the market, or waiting for the roads to dry. For you, it means danger. You dress quickly, wrap your injured hand again, and step outside. The street is already covered with shallow streams of muddy water. People hurry beneath wooden awnings while carts struggle through the soft ground. Horses pull against their harnesses, their hooves slipping on wet stones. You make your way toward the work yard where the master is waiting beneath a wooden shelter. He looks at the sky and then at you. He tells you that several drainage channels have already overflowed. One of the lower streets is beginning to flood, and water is entering the cellars of several houses. The town authorities want the channels cleared before the water rises any further. You look at your hand. The swelling has not disappeared, but you say nothing. You take your tools and follow the others toward the flooded district. The rain becomes heavier as you walk. By the time you reach the lower street, your clothes are already soaked. The water is moving quickly between the buildings. Residents are standing outside their doors, watching helplessly as dirty rainwater rises around their feet. Some are trying to move barrels and sacks to higher ground. Others are carrying baskets of food out of their cellars. A merchant is shouting at his workers to move his goods. Everyone is worried. The master points toward the main drainage opening. If the channel can be cleared, the water should begin draining away. If it cannot, the lower street may become completely flooded. You remove the wooden cover. Water is rushing beneath it with tremendous force. You immediately realize that entering the channel will be dangerous. The master tells everyone to wait until the water level drops slightly. But the residents are impatient. One man demands that you enter immediately. The master tells him that if the current pulls a worker underground, nobody will be able to save him. The man becomes silent. You understand why. There are no rescue teams waiting nearby. There is no safe equipment. If you are swept away beneath the street, you may disappear into the drainage system and never return. After several minutes, the water slows enough for you to enter. You tie a rope around your waist and hand the other end to two workers above. You take your lantern and descend. The moment your boots touch the channel floor, the force of the water pushes against your legs. You lean forward and hold the wall. The current is cold and powerful. You move one step at a time. The lantern shakes in your hand. Water is flowing so quickly that you can barely hear anything else. You continue deeper into the passage. The tunnel is almost completely flooded. In some places, the water reaches your waist. You cannot see the floor. Every step is a guess. You use the wooden tool to search ahead. Suddenly, the tool strikes something solid. You stop. There is a blockage. You lower the lantern as much as possible and see a mass of branches, straw, mud, broken wood, and other material packed tightly across the channel. The heavy rain has carried debris from the streets into the drainage system, and it has become trapped here. You signal the workers above that you have found the blockage. They tighten the rope. You begin pulling at the material. The current makes everything difficult. Every time you remove one piece, another is pushed against it by the water. You pull out a branch. Another piece of wood strikes your leg. You grab it and throw it aside. Your hands are shaking from the cold. Your injured hand hurts intensely, but you continue. Slowly, the blockage begins to break apart. Water rushes through the gaps. The current suddenly becomes stronger. You stumble and fall against the wall. The lantern nearly slips from your hand. You catch it just before it falls into the water. You press yourself against the stone and wait. The water continues rushing around you. For several seconds, you wonder whether the rope will hold. Then the current becomes weaker. You breathe deeply and continue working. You remove more branches, more mud, more broken wood. Eventually, a large section collapses away from the wall. A huge amount of water surges through the opening. You move backward as quickly as possible. The water pushes against your legs and carries debris past you. You hear the workers above shouting. The drainage channel is clearing. You hold onto the wall until the worst of the current passes. Then you look ahead. The tunnel is open. Water is moving rapidly into the deeper part of the system. You signal the workers above. They begin pulling you toward the entrance. When you reach the surface, you collapse onto the wet stones. Rain hits your face. People gather around you. Someone brings a piece of cloth. Another person helps you stand. You are exhausted, but the water level in the street has already begun falling. The residents cheer. A woman thanks you repeatedly. You barely respond. You are too tired to speak. The master tells everyone to rest for a few minutes, but another problem appears almost immediately. A cellar nearby has filled with water, and the drainage channel behind the house is blocked. You look at the master. He looks at you. Neither of you wants to say it, but you both know what happens next. Another descent, another tunnel, another blockage. You walk toward the house. The owner is standing outside, desperate. His cellar contains food, barrels, tools, and several valuable items. If the water remains inside, much of it will be ruined. He asks how long it will take. The master tells him that they will work as quickly as possible. You open the drainage access. This channel is smaller than the previous one. You will have to crawl. You tie the rope around yourself again and lower yourself into the darkness. The rain continues above. Water drips through cracks in the stone. You crawl forward on your hands and knees. Your injured hand presses against the wet stone and sends pain through your arm. You grit your teeth. The passage becomes narrower. You have to turn your shoulders sideways to continue. After several minutes, you reach the blockage. It is made mostly of mud. The heavy rain has washed soil into the channel and created a thick wall of sediment. You begin scraping it away. The mud is heavy and sticky. You push it into a wooden container. The worker behind you pulls it backward. Container after container leaves the tunnel. The work seems endless. Your knees hurt. Your back burns. Your fingers are numb from the cold water. But slowly, the mud begins to disappear. After hours, you finally reach a section where the water is moving. You clear the remaining material and watch the current begin to flow. The cellar above starts draining. The homeowner sees the water level dropping and thanks you. You climb out covered in mud. The man gives the master a small payment. He also offers you a piece of bread and a cup of watered wine. You accept both. The bread is hard, but you eat it quickly. The wine warms your stomach. You sit beneath the doorway while the rain continues. You watch the family carrying their belongings out of the cellar. Some barrels have been saved. Some food has been ruined. They are disappointed, but at least the water is leaving. You realize that this is another part of your work that people rarely see. You do not simply clean tunnels. You protect people's belongings from destruction. You protect markets from flooding. You protect houses from dirty water. You prevent streets. The fifth day begins with a strange silence in the town, the kind of silence that usually means something has gone wrong. You arrive at the work yard just after sunrise and immediately notice that the master is speaking with two officials from the town council. Their expressions are serious, and one of them is holding a sealed letter. You wait beside the tools until the master finally turns toward you. He tells you that a major drainage channel beneath the wealthier district has stopped functioning. Several houses have reported foul water appearing in their cellars, and one wealthy family has complained that the smell is becoming unbearable. The officials want the problem solved before the end of the day. You almost laugh when you hear that. They always want the impossible done quickly. You look at the tools and then at your injured hand. The swelling has decreased slightly, but the wound is still painful. The master tells you that this will be a difficult job because the channel is older than most of the buildings around it. Parts of the passage may be unstable. You take your lantern, rope, shovel, wooden hook, and a small hammer. The crew gathers around the cart, and together you walk toward the wealthy district. The streets become cleaner as you approach it. The houses are larger, the walls are better maintained, and the roads are less crowded. Servants move quickly between buildings carrying baskets and water. You cannot help noticing the difference between this part of town and the poorer streets where you normally work. Here, people expect their problems to be solved immediately. When you arrive at the first house, a wealthy merchant is waiting impatiently. He tells the master that his cellar smells terrible and that several barrels of stored food have already been damaged by dirty water. He complains about the town council, the drainage workers, and the weather before finally asking when the problem will be fixed. The master calmly tells him that nobody can know until the channel is inspected. The merchant looks at you and then at your filthy clothing. He seems uncomfortable standing so close to you. You have seen that expression many times. People need you, but they do not want to stand near you. The master opens the drainage access behind the house. You lower your lantern and see a dark passage disappearing beneath the foundations. The water level is higher than normal. You tie the rope around your waist and begin descending. The passage is surprisingly large at first, but the ceiling becomes lower as you move deeper. The air is warm and damp. You hear water dripping somewhere ahead. You continue slowly, placing one hand against the wall while holding the lantern with the other. Your boots sink into thick mud. The passage has not been cleaned for a long time. After several minutes, you reach a section where the ceiling has partially collapsed. Stones and earth cover half the channel. Water is trapped behind the debris. You touch one of the stones and feel it move slightly. You immediately step backward. If the ceiling collapses while you are underneath it, the rope above will be useless. You signal to the workers and climb back toward the surface. The master listens to your report and decides that wooden supports must be installed before the blockage can be removed. The merchant becomes impatient again and asks why this is necessary. The master tells him that the workers cannot safely clear the channel until the ceiling is supported. The merchant says that he does not care how it is done. He only wants his cellar dry. You look at him and say nothing. You have learned that some people cannot understand the danger because they never have to enter it themselves. The workers bring thick wooden beams. You return underground with them. The passage feels even darker now because the lantern light is blocked by the supports you carry. You crawl beneath the unstable section and place the first beam against the ceiling. Another worker holds it while you secure the base. The stone above creaks. Everyone freezes. A small piece of dirt falls onto your shoulder. You look upward. For a moment you imagine the entire ceiling collapsing. Then the sound stops. You breathe again. The second support is placed farther ahead. Then a third. Slowly, the dangerous section becomes safer. Only after the supports are secure do you begin removing the fallen earth. The first shovel of material is heavier than expected. Wet soil sticks to the blade. You lift it and place it into the container. Another worker pulls the container backward. You repeat the process. The tunnel is so narrow that every movement requires effort. Your shoulders strike the walls. Your knees press into the mud. Your injured hand hurts every time you grip the shovel. You keep going. Above you, the merchant continues waiting. You can hear his voice occasionally through the access opening, demanding updates. You ignore him. Your world has become the dark tunnel, the wooden supports, the mud, and the sound of water. After several hours, the first section of the blockage is cleared. Water begins moving slowly. You follow the channel farther into the darkness. The water becomes deeper. You crouch and continue. Suddenly, your lantern flickers. You stop immediately. A sewer worker without light is nearly blind. You protect the flame with your hand and wait for it to stabilize. The passage ahead is completely black. You check the oil in the lantern. There is enough left, but not much. You tell the worker behind you to carry a second lantern. He brings it forward. Now there are two small flames pushing back the darkness. You continue. The passage opens into a larger chamber. The ceiling is high enough to stand upright. The chamber smells worse than anything you have encountered that week. Waste has accumulated along the edges, forming thick layers against the walls. The water flows through the center, but something is blocking the far end. You move closer. The lantern reveals a strange collection of objects trapped against the stones. Broken pottery, wooden boards, animal bones, pieces of cloth, food scraps, even a small wooden toy. You wonder how the toy ended up here. Perhaps a child dropped it into a gutter. Perhaps it was swept away during a storm. Now it sits underground among everything else the town has forgotten. You begin clearing the material. The chamber allows you to stand, but the work is still exhausting. You shovel the waste into containers while the other workers carry it toward the surface. After several hours, the water level begins to drop. You realize the main blockage must be close. You follow the flow. The tunnel narrows again, and the ceiling becomes dangerously low. You crawl forward until you find the blockage. It is enormous. A mixture of mud, timber, cloth, and stone has become packed into the channel. It looks almost impossible to remove. The master, who has entered the tunnel behind you, looks at it and says that it may take the entire day. You already know that. You begin working. The first pieces of timber are difficult to remove because they are wedged tightly between the walls. You use the wooden hook to pull one free. It snaps suddenly and hits your arm. Pain shoots through your shoulder. You curse quietly. The master asks whether you are injured. You tell him no. He knows you are lying but continues working. The crew becomes a machine. One worker breaks the material. Another carries it. Another pulls the containers. You keep scraping and shoveling. Hours pass. The lantern oil begins running low. Your body becomes exhausted. You have not eaten since morning. Your stomach cramps with hunger. You think about stopping, but the blockage is finally beginning to break apart. A large section falls away, and water rushes forward. You move backward quickly. The current rises to your knees. You hold on to the wall and wait. The water carries debris through the tunnel. One worker loses his footing and falls. You grab his arm before the current can carry him away. He clings to you until the water slows. Both of you breathe heavily. The sixth day begins with a headache that refuses to disappear. And before you even leave your home, you already feel the familiar heaviness in your body. Your injured hand has improved slightly, but the skin around the wound remains tender, and your back feels as though someone has spent the entire night pressing a stone against it. You eat a small piece of bread, drink some water, wrap your hand once more, and leave for the work yard. The morning air is cold and damp, and a thin mist hangs between the buildings. When you arrive, the master is already there with several workers and a cart filled with wooden supports, ropes, lanterns, shovels, hooks, and buckets. He tells you that today's assignment is different from the usual blockages. A section of the town's main drainage route has been reported as unusually dangerous, and someone believes that part of the underground channel has become contaminated by a large amount of animal waste from the surrounding stables. You immediately understand what this means. It will not simply be a matter of removing mud or broken wood. You may have to spend hours inside a narrow passage filled with stagnant water and decomposing material. The master tells everyone to prepare carefully, and you notice that even the most experienced workers seem uneasy. You begin walking toward the stables with the crew. The district is already noisy. Horses are being prepared for work, carts are being loaded, and stable boys are carrying buckets of water. The smell of animals is strong even above ground, but when you reach the drainage access behind the stables, the odor becomes much worse. A thick stream of dark water is slowly leaking from beneath the stones. Several stable workers are standing nearby, complaining that the drainage has been backing up for days. The master asks whether anything unusual has been thrown into the channel. One man admits that large amounts of straw and animal waste have probably been washed into it during recent rain. The master sighs. He removes the cover and looks inside. The water below is almost completely still. You lower your lantern and see layers of straw floating on the surface. The channel is badly blocked. You tie the rope around your waist and prepare to descend. The master tells you that nobody should enter alone. 2 workers will remain close behind you, while another stays above to control the rope. You climb down carefully. The smell immediately becomes overwhelming. You pull the cloth tighter around your face and breathe as slowly as possible. The water reaches your ankles, then your knees as you move deeper into the passage. Straw sticks to your boots. You push it aside with a wooden hook. The passage is dark and cramped, and the walls are covered with damp dirt. Every few steps, you have to crouch lower because the ceiling drops. You continue until you reach the first blockage. It is exactly what you feared. Straw has become packed together with mud and animal waste until it forms a thick wall across the channel. You begin pulling the straw apart. At first it seems easy, but the deeper layers are heavy and compacted. You use the hook to break them apart while another worker fills the containers. The material is lifted toward the surface 1 bucket at a time. The process is slow, disgusting, and exhausting. Sweat begins running down your back despite the cold water around your legs. Your hand hurts whenever you grip the hook. You change your grip repeatedly to avoid putting pressure on the wound. After an hour, the blockage has barely changed. You continue anyway. The stable workers above begin shouting that the water level is rising. The master tells them to stay back. You hear the voices faintly through the stone. You work faster. Another layer of straw breaks free. Water suddenly begins moving around your legs. You step backward as a wave of filthy water rushes past. The worker behind you grabs your shoulder to stop you from falling. You regain your balance and continue. The passage is becoming more dangerous because the water is moving faster. You know that if the blockage breaks suddenly, the current could knock you down. You tell the workers to stay against the wall. You use the hook to loosen another section. Nothing happens. You pull again. The material shifts. You pull a third time. Suddenly, the entire blockage gives way. A powerful stream of water crashes through the passage. You press yourself against the wall as the current rushes past. The lantern almost goes out. The worker behind you shouts, but you cannot hear him clearly over the sound of the water. You hold the lantern above your head and wait. After several seconds, the current becomes weaker. You look ahead. The passage is open, but now another problem is visible. The water has exposed a deep crack in the stone floor. You tell the master when you return to the surface. He decides that the channel needs to be inspected farther ahead. The work could take the entire day. You climb out and take a short rest. The stable workers are relieved that the water is moving again, but the master is not satisfied. He says that if the crack is causing the drainage to weaken, the blockage will return soon. He orders the crew to continue farther into the underground system. You drink some water and eat a small piece of bread. Then you descend again. This time you carry a hammer and several wooden wedges. The passage beyond the cleared section is older and more damaged. The stones are uneven, and the ceiling has several cracks. You move slowly, tapping the walls and floor with the hammer to test their stability. Every sound echoes through the tunnel. The workers behind you remain silent. Nobody wants to be the one who causes a collapse. After several minutes, you reach the crack section. The floor has partially separated, creating a narrow opening beneath the channel. Water disappears into the gap. You realize that this is probably why the drainage has been functioning poorly. The channel is losing water beneath the stones. You kneel and inspect the opening. There is no way to repair it from here without reinforcing the floor. The master tells you to mark the location and continue searching for a safer route. You move forward. The tunnel becomes wider, and eventually you reach an old chamber. Unlike the narrow channels, this room has a high ceiling and several side passages. The walls are covered with layers of grime. You raise the lantern and discover old wooden beams crossing the ceiling. Some have rotted almost completely. The chamber may have once been used as a collection point for drainage from several streets. Now it is mostly forgotten. You step carefully. The floor is covered with mud and broken stone. You notice something unusual near one wall. A small wooden box is half buried in the mud. You pull it free. It is damaged, but inside you find several pieces of pottery and a rusted metal object. You wonder how long they have been underground. Perhaps years, perhaps decades. The town above has changed while these objects remained in darkness. You place them aside and continue inspecting the chamber. One of the side passages is almost completely blocked by fallen stone. Another is filled with stagnant water. The third appears to continue toward the town wall. The master decides that the passage toward the wall must be inspected because it may connect to the main drainage route. You enter with 2 workers. The tunnel becomes increasingly narrow. You crawl for several minutes until you reach another chamber. Here the air feels different. It is colder. You hear wind moving somewhere ahead. The passage may connect to an opening outside the town. You continue carefully until you find a stone grate partially covered by dirt. Beyond it, you can see daylight. You have reached the edge of the town. The drainage system extends farther than you expected. Rainwater and waste are being carried toward a ditch outside the walls. You inspect the outlet and discover that it is also partially blocked. This explains why the water has been backing up throughout the district. The entire system has become overloaded. You begin clear. The seventh day begins beneath a sky covered with heavy gray clouds, and you wake with the uncomfortable feeling that something is wrong before anyone has even told you what it is. Your body has barely recovered from yesterday's work. Your shoulders ache whenever you move, and the wound on your hand has finally begun to close, but the skin remains sensitive and fragile. You eat quickly, wrap the hand one more time, pull on your boots, and leave the house while the streets are still quiet. As you approach the work yard, you notice several people gathered around the master. 2 town officials are there again, along with a messenger from the city gate. Their faces tell you that this will not be an ordinary day of clearing small blockages. The master waits until everyone has arrived before explaining the problem. During the night, a section of the main drainage system near the northern quarter has begun overflowing, and the water has started moving backward through several smaller channels. One house has already reported dirty water coming up through its floor drain. Another has discovered that its cellar is filling. If the main channel is not cleared, the problem could spread across an entire district. You look at the tools being loaded onto the cart and realize that this will probably be one of the longest jobs yet. The master tells you that the affected channel is one of the oldest in the town. It was built many years ago, repaired several times, and partially covered by later construction. Nobody knows exactly how stable it is. The officials want the problem solved before the townspeople begin gathering in the streets. You almost smile at the absurdity of that request. The sun has barely risen, and they are already expecting the underground system to be repaired before the town even wakes. You and the crew begin walking toward the northern quarter. The streets become narrower as you move away from the center. Houses lean slightly over the roads, their upper floors almost touching above your head. Small streams of dirty water move along the gutters. People begin opening doors as you pass. Some recognize the tools and immediately understand what is happening. A few step aside quickly. Others watch with curiosity. You have become a familiar sight in the town, even if nobody knows your name. You are simply one of the men who goes below. When you reach the affected street, the situation is worse than expected. Water has risen through several cracks between the stones, forming a dark pool near the center of the road. Residents have placed wooden boards across the wet area so they can walk without stepping directly into the water. A woman is trying to carry buckets of dirty water out of her house. A man is shouting that the authorities should have repaired the drainage weeks ago. The master ignores the complaints and examines the access point. He removes the cover and looks inside. The water is moving in the wrong direction. That is the most dangerous sign. It means the main channel is blocked farther downstream. You prepare the rope and lantern. Before descending, the master reminds everyone to stay together and never move beyond the marked section without permission. The passage may be unstable. You nod and climb down. The first thing you notice is the water. It is higher than usual, reaching almost to your thighs. The current is weak but moving backward toward the entrance. You hold the wall and move forward carefully. The tunnel is dark, narrow, and filled with the smell of stagnant water. Every few steps, your boots disappear into soft mud. You use the wooden hook to test the ground ahead. The others follow closely behind. You move deeper into the channel. The sound of the town above slowly disappears. There are no voices now, only dripping water and the occasional echo of your footsteps. The darkness feels heavier than usual. Your lantern illuminates the wall only a few feet ahead, leaving everything beyond it completely black. After several minutes, the tunnel begins to slope downward. The water becomes deeper. You continue until it reaches your waist. The cold makes your muscles tighten. You hear the worker behind you breathing heavily. Nobody speaks. Everyone is concentrating on staying upright. Suddenly, your lantern reveals something floating ahead. At first you think it is a piece of wood. Then you realize it is a dead animal. You push it aside with the wooden hook and continue. The water smells terrible. You try not to breathe deeply. The passage turns sharply to the left. You follow the bend and discover that the tunnel has widened. The ceiling is higher here, but the water is much deeper. You stop and inspect the channel. Something large is blocking the path ahead. You raise the lantern. A huge mass of mud, broken timber, stones, and household waste has become packed against the wall. The blockage is almost as wide as the tunnel itself. You understand immediately why the water is flowing backward. The master arrives beside you and studies the obstruction. He says that it cannot be cleared by hand alone. The crew will need to break it apart piece by piece. You begin with the smaller debris. You pull out pieces of wood and broken pottery. Another worker uses the hook to loosen the mud. The water pushes against your legs constantly. Every movement is difficult. You fill the containers and signal for them to be pulled back. The work begins again. Push, pull, lift, carry, empty, repeat. The first hour seems to change nothing. The blockage remains enormous. Your arms become tired. Your back begins aching. Your injured hand throbs whenever you grip the hook. You try to ignore it. The master tells everyone to work slowly. Rushing will only make the debris collapse unpredictably. You continue. Eventually, a large piece of timber comes loose. It is heavier than expected. You and another worker pull together. The timber suddenly breaks free, causing both of you to fall backward into the water. You hit the wall hard. Your shoulder burns with pain. The other worker laughs nervously. You both stand again. Nothing is broken. You continue. More pieces begin coming loose. The blockage is slowly shrinking. But then you hear a sound that makes everyone stop. A deep cracking noise comes from somewhere above the tunnel. You look upward. Dust falls from the ceiling. The master immediately orders everyone to move backward. You retreat toward the wider section. Another crack echoes through the tunnel. A stone falls into the water behind you. For several seconds, nobody moves. You stare at the ceiling. The old stonework is shifting. The master decides that the section is too unstable to continue working beneath it. He orders the crew to withdraw. You begin moving backward through the water. The current is stronger now. As the blockage has shifted, water pressure is changing. You hold on to the wall and move carefully. Suddenly, a large section of mud collapses behind you. Water rushes forward. You are pushed off your feet. Your body is carried several meters through the channel before you manage to grab a protruding stone. Your lantern slips from your hand and disappears into the darkness. You hold onto the stone with both hands. The current pulls at your legs. You shout for help. One of the workers grabs your arm and pulls you toward the wall. Another worker secures the rope. Together they drag you out of the strongest current. You are breathing heavily. Your clothes are completely soaked. The master checks whether you are injured. You shake your head, although your shoulder hurts badly. The lantern is gone. Without it, the passage is almost completely dark. The workers use their remaining lights to guide everyone back. You move slowly. The tunnel seems longer now than when you entered. Every shadow looks like another collapse waiting to happen. Eventually, you reach the entrance. Daylight appears above you. You climb out and collapse onto the whetstones. People gather around you. The residents are shocked. The 8th day begins with your body feeling older than it did only a week ago. The bruising on your shoulder has turned dark beneath the skin. Your knees ache whenever you bend them, and the cut on your hand has finally begun to heal, although the skin remains rough and painful. You wake before sunrise because the sound of carts passing through the street has already started. For a few moments you remain beneath the blanket, listening to the town slowly coming alive, wondering whether the work will ever become easier. Then you remember that the drainage system does not care how tired you are. You get dressed, wrap your hand, eat a small piece of bread, and leave your home. The morning is unusually cold, and a thin layer of mist hangs between the houses. When you arrive at the work yard, the master is already waiting with the crew. He tells you that yesterday's repairs have worked, but another problem has appeared farther south. A public drainage channel near a crowded neighborhood has become blocked, and the water has started collecting beneath several houses. More importantly, a group of workers who inspected the area during the night reported that something unusual was moving inside the channel. Nobody knows exactly what it was. The master tells everyone to be careful. You take a lantern and rope, then follow the crew through the narrow streets. The neighborhood is already crowded when you arrive. It is poorer than the district you worked in yesterday. Houses are smaller, streets are narrower, and waste has accumulated along the gutters. People are standing outside their doors arguing about the smell. One woman tells the master that dirty water has been appearing beneath her kitchen floor. Another man says rats have begun coming through cracks in his cellar. The master listens and examines the access point. The wooden cover is swollen from moisture and difficult to lift. 2 workers use a metal bar to loosen it. When the cover finally comes away, a wave of terrible smell rises from below. Several people immediately step backward. You remain where you are. You have already learned that the smell is often the least dangerous part of the job. The master lowers a lantern and sees that the water below is unusually dark. He tells you to inspect it. You tie the rope around your waist and climb down. The passage is narrow, and the water reaches your ankles almost immediately. You move slowly while holding the wall. The stones are slick with moisture. Your lantern illuminates a small circle around you, but the darkness beyond seems endless. The other workers follow. You hear their footsteps behind you. As you move deeper into the passage, the air becomes warmer. The smell of stagnant water is mixed with something stronger, something rotten. You turn a corner and see dozens of rats moving along the edges of the channel. They scatter when the lantern approaches. One runs directly between your boots. You barely react. The others make nervous noises, but you tell them to keep moving. Rats are unpleasant, but they are not the reason the water has stopped flowing. You continue until the passage begins to widen. The water becomes deeper. You test the ground with your wooden hook. The hook disappears into soft mud. You step carefully. Suddenly, you hear a strange scraping sound ahead. Everyone stops. You raise the lantern. Nothing moves. The sound comes again. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. The worker behind you whispers that something is there. You tell him to stay quiet. You move forward slowly. The lantern reveals a large wooden object wedged across the channel. At first you think it is part of a cart, Then you realize it is a broken section of timber that has been washed underground. Behind it, an enormous amount of waste has accumulated. The scraping sound comes from rats moving around the wood. You sigh with relief. It is not some unknown creature. It is simply another blockage. You begin clearing the area. The wooden beam is too large to move by hand, so you use the hook to pull smaller pieces away. Another worker starts cutting the beam with a small saw. The work is slow. The channel is too narrow for proper movement. Every time you swing the tool, your shoulder hurts. You switch positions whenever possible. Eventually, the beam begins to crack. You tell everyone to step back. The worker cuts again. The timber breaks suddenly and falls into the water. The resulting wave pushes against your legs. You hold onto the wall until the water settles. Behind the timber is a thick wall of mud and waste. You begin removing it. The first containers are easy enough, but the deeper material is compacted and heavy. Hours pass. The neighborhood above becomes louder. You can hear people walking across the street. Someone is shouting at a merchant. Children are running. A dog barks continuously. The sounds are muffled by the stone, making the town above seem like another world. You continue working below it. At midday, one of the workers asks whether you should stop for food. The master says there is still too much blockage. You know what that means. No meal. You take a small piece of bread from your pocket and eat it quickly while standing in the water. It is already damp from the humidity. You do not care. Hunger is easier to tolerate than the smell. You continue. Your shoulders burn. Your fingers ache. Your boots feel heavier with every step. But slowly the blockage begins to shrink. Water starts moving through a narrow opening. You widen it with the wooden hook. A stronger current appears. You step aside. The water rushes past your legs and carries pieces of debris away. The channel is beginning to breathe again. You continue clearing until the water level drops. The tunnel becomes easier to walk through. The master decides to inspect the passage farther ahead before declaring the work finished. You move deeper. The walls change from rough stone to older brickwork. Some bricks are cracked. Others have fallen completely away, revealing dark spaces behind the walls. You inspect one of the openings with the lantern. It appears to lead into a narrow cavity. You tell the master. He says it may be an old maintenance passage. The medieval town has been rebuilt many times, and nobody has records of every underground structure. You continue cautiously. A few meters later, the tunnel opens into a chamber. This chamber is different from the others you have seen. It contains old wooden platforms along the walls, now covered with dirt and rot. There are several narrow channels leading into the room from different directions. You realize that this must have once been an important collection point for water from several streets. The master studies the structure and says that the chamber may have been abandoned years ago because of repeated collapses. You look at the ceiling. Several stones are missing. The wooden supports are old and cracked. Nobody should stay here longer than necessary. But before you can leave, you notice something strange on the floor. There are fresh footprints in the mud. You stare at them. They are not from your workers. The footprints are smaller and lead toward one of the side passages. Everyone becomes silent. The master raises his lantern. You follow the tracks. They continue deeper into the darkness. The master tells everyone to stay together. You move slowly through the side passage. The ceiling is low enough that you must bend. The footprints continue. Then they disappear beside a small opening in the wall. You shine the lantern inside. There is nothing there except old cloth and a wooden container. Perhaps the footprints were made by someone who entered earlier to inspect the drainage. The master says that the neighborhood children may have found a way inside. You do not believe that. The passage is too dangerous. But there is no time to investigate further. You return to the chamber. Before leaving, you inspect the main drainage route. A large amount of sediment has accumulated near one of the outlets. You decide to remove it before returning. The ninth day begins with a restless feeling that you cannot quite explain. You wake before the bells, before the carts begin moving through the streets, and before the first merchants open their shutters. For several moments you lie still, staring into the darkness, thinking about the footprints you discovered in the abandoned chamber yesterday. You tell yourself that they were probably nothing. Perhaps another worker had entered the passage weeks ago. Perhaps the mud preserved older tracks. Perhaps your tired mind simply made the situation seem more mysterious than it really was. But deep down, you know that the footprints were fresh. You saw the wet edges. You saw where the mud had been disturbed. Someone had been there recently. You finally get out of bed, dress, eat a small piece of bread, and leave for the work yard. Your shoulder is still painful, but you can move it. Your hand has almost healed. Your knees, however, seem to hurt more every morning. When you arrive, the master is speaking with the same town official who visited several days earlier. The official tells him that there has been another complaint from the Southern District. Several houses have reported that their drainage openings are producing an unusually strong smell, and one household claims that a strange dark substance has appeared in its water channel. The master listens carefully. Then he looks at you and the other workers. He tells everyone to prepare for another inspection underground. You immediately wonder whether this is connected to the abandoned chamber from yesterday. You do not mention your suspicion. There is no proof. The crew loads the cart and begins walking south. The streets are already becoming crowded. People are carrying baskets toward the market. Children are being led to lessons. Animals are being moved through the narrow roads, and merchants are shouting about their goods. You walk through all of it carrying a shovel and lantern, knowing that soon you will disappear beneath the same streets where everyone else is beginning their day. When you reach the Southern District, you find several residents gathered around a drainage opening. One woman tells the master that the smell began during the night. Another says that her husband became sick after cleaning water from their cellar. The master tells everyone to stay away from the contaminated area until the channel has been inspected. You prepare the rope and lantern. Before descending, you examine the water near the entrance. It has a strange gray color. There is a thin layer of something floating on the surface. You do not know what it is. The master tells you to be careful and to report anything unusual. You descend. The air underground is warmer than outside, and the smell becomes stronger immediately. You cover your mouth with cloth and breathe slowly. The passage is narrower than the one you entered yesterday. Water reaches your ankles, and pieces of debris float past your boots. You move forward with two workers behind you. The tunnel bends several times. You inspect the walls as you go. There are no signs of collapse, but the stone is unusually wet. After several minutes, you reach a section where the water has stopped moving. A thick layer of dark material covers the bottom. You use the hook to disturb it. The material breaks apart into a greasy substance mixed with mud. One worker says it smells like rotten meat. You agree. The blockage is not ordinary household waste. Something has been dumped into the channel. You begin clearing it. The material sticks to the tools and is difficult to remove. You fill containers and send them toward the surface. The smell becomes unbearable. One of the workers begins coughing. You tell him to go back, but he refuses. He says he can manage. You continue. After an hour, you reach a large mass blocking the passage. It appears to be made of cloth, straw, animal bones, and something that looks like ash. You pull at the cloth. A small wooden object falls free. You pick it up and examine it under the lantern. It looks like a piece of a broken box. There are dark stains on the wood. You place it aside. The master sees it and asks where you found it. You point toward the blockage. He becomes quiet. He tells everyone to keep working. The channel is slowly opening. Water begins moving again. You follow the flow farther into the darkness. The tunnel opens into a larger chamber, but this is not the same chamber you saw yesterday. This one is older and more damaged. Several wooden supports have collapsed. The walls are covered with black stains. You shine the lantern toward the floor. There are more footprints. This time there is no doubt. They are fresh. The master sees them too. He immediately tells everyone to stop. You stand silently, listening. At first there is nothing. Then you hear a faint sound from one of the side passages. A soft scrape against stone. Everyone turns toward it. The master raises the lantern. He tells everyone to stay together. You move toward the passage slowly. The sound stops. You continue. The side passage is narrow enough that only one person can walk through at a time. The master goes first. You follow directly behind him. The walls are wet and uneven. The passage turns sharply and opens into another small chamber. There is an old wooden ladder against one wall. The ladder leads upward toward a narrow opening. You shine the lantern into it. Someone has removed several stones from the ceiling. There is a way out. The master examines the opening and realizes that it connects to an abandoned storage building above ground. Someone has been using the underground passage to enter the building without being seen. You look at the fresh footprints again. The mystery is beginning to make sense. The underground drainage system is not only carrying waste. Someone is using the forgotten tunnels as a secret route through the town. You hear another sound above the opening. Everyone freezes. There is movement. The master signals for silence. You extinguish your lantern. Darkness surrounds you completely. For several moments, nobody breathes loudly. Then you hear footsteps above. Someone is walking across the floor of the building. The footsteps stop directly over the opening. You can hear a faint creaking sound. The person above seems to be listening. You remain completely still. After a long moment, the footsteps move away. The master waits several minutes before lighting the lantern again. He tells everyone that they will not pursue whoever is using the passage. Their job is to repair the drainage system, not chase criminals. But he also says that the discovery must be reported to the authorities. You return through the side passage. The fresh footprints remain visible in the mud. You try to memorize their shape. They are from boots, not bare feet. Whoever made them is probably an adult. You return to the main chamber and continue inspecting the drainage route. The black material blocking the channel appears to come from farther upstream. You follow it. Eventually, you reach another blockage. This one contains sacks. Several heavy sacks have been thrown into the channel and torn open by the water. Inside are pieces of cloth, ash, broken pottery, and animal remains. The material has contaminated the water and created the terrible smell reported by the residents. You begin removing the sacks. They are surprisingly heavy. One worker cuts the ropes while another pulls them free. You carry them toward the entrance one by one. As you work, you realize that this was not accidental. Someone deliberately dumped these materials into the drainage system. The master says nothing, but you can see the same conclusion on his face. The work continues for hours. Eventually, the channel begins flowing properly again. The dark material is carried away by the current. The water becomes clearer. The smell weakens. You climb out near midday. The residents are waiting. They immediately notice that the water is moving again. The master tells them that the 10th day begins with rain, not the gentle kind that passes quickly, but a cold, persistent rain that falls steadily from a sky the color of old iron. You wake to the sound of water striking the roof and immediately know that this will be a difficult day. Rain is one of the greatest enemies of a medieval town's drainage system. Every gutter, every street channel, every underground passage begins filling at once, and whatever has been ignored for weeks suddenly becomes a serious problem. You dress quickly, wrap your injured hand, and leave the house with your hood pulled tightly over your head. The streets are already covered in shallow streams. People hurry beneath wooden awnings, trying to protect their clothes from the rain. Carts move slowly through the mud, their wheels sinking into the soft roads. When you reach the work yard, the crew is already preparing. The master looks tired. He tells you that 3 separate drainage channels have overflowed during the night. The northern quarter is flooded again, but this time the problem is larger. Water has also entered a section of the market and begun collecting beneath several houses. The town officials want the crew divided into 2 groups so that both problems can be handled at once. You are assigned to the more dangerous route because you have experience with the older channels. You load your tools onto the cart and begin walking toward the market. The rain becomes heavier as you move. By the time you arrive, the market is almost empty. Merchants are standing beneath covered stalls, protecting their goods from the water. Wooden crates float in shallow pools. Mud covers the road. Several people are carrying baskets of food away from the flooded area. The market master is furious. He complains that the drainage workers have failed again. Your master ignores him and examines the nearest access point. Water is flowing out of the opening rather than into it. That means the channel below is completely overwhelmed. He tells you that you will need to enter from another access point farther downhill. You follow the crew through a narrow alley behind the market. The entrance is partially covered by a wooden structure, and rainwater is pouring directly into it. You remove the cover and look down. The water below is moving quickly. The master tells you to wait until the flow decreases, but the rain continues. There is no guarantee that it will. Eventually, he decides that you must enter before the water rises further. You tie the rope around your waist and descend. The moment your boots touch the water, you feel the force of the current. It pushes against your legs and tries to pull you toward the lower section of the tunnel. You grip the wall and move carefully. The other workers follow behind you. The passage is completely flooded in places. You cannot see the bottom, so you use the hook to test every step. Sometimes the hook hits stone. Sometimes it disappears into mud. You move slowly. The sound of rushing water fills the tunnel. Your lantern flickers repeatedly because of the damp air. You protect the flame with your hand and continue. After several minutes, the passage narrows. The ceiling is so low that you have to bend forward. Water reaches your waist. The current becomes stronger. You hear the worker behind you telling you that the rope is becoming tight. You look back. The rope is stretched against the current. You tell everyone to remain close together. You continue until you reach the main blockage. It is enormous. Rainwater has carried branches, straw, pieces of wood, broken pottery, cloth, and mud into the channel. Everything has become packed together. The blockage is holding back a huge amount of water. If it breaks suddenly, the current could become dangerous. The master orders everyone to move toward the sidewall. You begin removing the material carefully. You pull out branches first, then pieces of cloth, then chunks of mud. The water pushes harder every time something is removed. You work slowly. Your hands are freezing. Your shoulders ache. The wound on your hand burns whenever the wet cloth touches it. You keep going. After an hour, the blockage has barely changed. The master decides that the crew needs to create a small opening near the top so that the pressure can escape gradually. You climb onto a narrow stone ledge and use the hammer to break pieces of compacted material. Each strike echoes through the tunnel. Water splashes against your face. You continue until a small hole appears. First, nothing happens. Then a thin stream of water shoots through. The pressure begins to decrease. You widen the opening. More water passes. The current around your legs becomes weaker. Everyone starts working faster. The blockage begins to collapse piece by piece. You pull away a large section of wood. Behind it is a wall of mud. You scrape it away with the shovel. Suddenly, a large amount of water rushes through the opening. You step backward quickly. The worker beside you slips and falls. You grab him by the arm before he is carried away. Together you pull him toward the wall. The current becomes violent for several seconds, then weakens. You look at the passage. The main channel is beginning to clear. Water rushes downstream toward the lower district. You continue removing debris until the channel is completely open. When you finally climb out, the market has changed. The water level is already dropping. Merchants begin moving their goods back toward their stalls. People cheer when they see the drainage working again. The market master thanks the crew, but the master simply tells him that the problem will return if the channels are not maintained. The rain is still falling. There is no time to celebrate. Another messenger arrives from the southern district. A section of road has collapsed. The master looks at you and the crew. Everyone knows what this means. Another underground inspection. You follow the messenger through the rain. The road near the southern quarter is in terrible condition. Several stones have disappeared into a large hole. Water is flowing into it from all directions. People are standing at a safe distance. The master examines the collapse and realizes that part of the underground channel has broken completely. The road above is no longer supported. If the cavity grows, an entire section of the street could collapse. You are told to inspect the tunnel beneath it. You lower the lantern into the opening. The darkness seems endless. The master tells you that this is one of the most dangerous situations you have faced. If the ceiling collapses while you are below, there may be no way out. You tie the rope around your waist again. You check the knots twice. Then you descend. The passage beneath the road is partially destroyed. Stones cover the floor. Water pours through gaps in the ceiling. Every few seconds, another small piece of dirt falls. You move quickly but carefully. The tunnel leads toward an old chamber. You recognize some of the stonework from previous inspections. You wonder whether this is connected to the hidden passages discovered yesterday. The master tells you to focus on the damaged section. You reach the area beneath the collapsed road. The ceiling is cracked in several places. A large section of earth has fallen into the channel, creating a hole that extends upward toward the street. You can see daylight through the opening. You inspect the surrounding stones. Several are loose. The master tells you to mark the unstable areas and begin removing only the material that can be safely moved. You work with the shovel and hook. Mud falls around you. The water is rising because of the rain. You have to work faster. Suddenly, a stone drops from the ceiling and hits the ground beside your foot. You jump backward. The master orders everyone to leave. But you notice that a large wooden beam has become trapped beneath the fallen earth. If it can be positioned correctly, it may temporarily support the ceiling. You tell the master. He hesitates. It is extremely dangerous. The 11th day begins before sunrise, and for the first time you wake up hoping that the master will tell you there is no underground work today. Your body has begun to feel permanently tired. The bruises on your shoulder have faded slightly, but the pain remains whenever you lift your arm too high. Your knees ache, your fingers are rough and cracked, and the skin around your old wound is still sensitive. You sit beside the cold remains of the fire for a moment before getting dressed. Outside, the streets are wet from yesterday's rain, and water still runs along the gutters in thin streams. You eat a small piece of bread, drink some water, wrap your hand, and leave the house. As you walk toward the work yard, you notice something strange. There are fewer people on the streets than usual. Several doors are still closed even though the morning bells have already rung. You wonder if the rain has caused more damage than you thought. When you reach the yard, the master is waiting with the crew, but his expression is more serious than usual. He tells everyone that the town officials have ordered an inspection of the old underground network beneath the central district. The road collapse yesterday has convinced them that the drainage system may be more damaged than anyone realized. Several sections of the town are now considered unsafe. More importantly, the hidden passage discovered 2 days ago has still not been properly investigated. The city guards searched the abandoned building during the night but found no one. However, they discovered evidence that someone had been using the building recently. The master says the officials believe the underground passages may be connected to illegal activity. Your job is still to inspect the drainage channels, but today you will also be expected to record anything unusual. You do not like the sound of that. You have spent your entire life learning how to clear mud, repair stone, and remove waste. You were not trained to search for criminals. The master gives each worker a fresh lantern and extra rope. He also provides wooden markers that can be placed beside damaged sections. The crew begins walking toward the central district. The streets are busy again, but people are talking about yesterday's collapse. Some point toward the workers as you pass. Others whisper about tunnels beneath the town. You hear a child telling his friend that monsters live under the streets. You almost smile. If the child knew what was actually down there, monsters would probably be the least interesting thing. The crew reaches the main access point beneath a narrow street near the market. The master removes the cover and inspects the opening. The water level is lower today, but the stones around the entrance are cracked. He tells everyone to descend carefully. You tie the rope around your waist and climb down. The familiar smell surrounds you immediately. Damp stone, stagnant water, rotting material, smoke from lantern oil. You have become so accustomed to it that you barely notice anymore. The passage is quiet. You move forward with the master leading. The first section appears stable, but after several meters you reach a place where the ceiling has begun to sag. Wooden supports have been installed in the past, but several are broken. You place a marker beside the damaged section. The master tells the workers to continue. You walk deeper into the network. The central district has older drainage channels than the poorer neighborhoods. The stones are larger, and some walls appear to have been constructed many generations ago. You pass through a narrow tunnel and enter a chamber you have never seen before. There are several channels leading in different directions. One appears to carry rainwater from the market. Another leads toward the town wall. A third disappears into darkness beneath a row of houses. The master studies the layout. He tells you that this chamber may be one of the oldest collection points in the town. Nobody above probably remembers that it exists. You inspect the floor and find a thick layer of sediment. You begin clearing it. After a few minutes, your shovel hits something hard. You dig around it and uncover a metal ring attached to a wooden hatch. The hatch is almost completely covered by mud. You call the master. He kneels beside you and examines it. He says that it does not belong to the drainage system. It appears to be a hidden entrance. Everyone becomes quiet. The master tells you not to open it until the guards arrive. But before anyone can leave, you hear a faint sound from beneath the hatch. Something moves below. You freeze. The master raises his lantern. Everyone listens. There is a soft scraping noise. Then silence. The master tells everyone to step back. He sends one worker to the surface to alert the guards. You remain in the chamber. The waiting is unbearable. You stare at the hatch. Every few seconds you think you hear movement beneath it. You grip your wooden hook. You know it would be useless against a person with a weapon, but holding it makes you feel slightly safer. After what seems like an hour, the worker returns with 2 guards. They descend into the chamber carrying swords and lanterns. The guards examine the hatch. One of them removes the mud around the edges. They lift it carefully. A rush of cold air rises from below. The opening leads into a much deeper passage. The guards descend first. You follow because the master tells you to inspect the structure. The passage beneath the hatch is completely different from the drainage channels. It is dry. The walls are made of older stone. There are no gutters or channels. It appears to have been built for people rather than water. You immediately understand that this is a hidden route through the town. The passage is wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. There are old footprints in the dust. Some are very old. Others are more recent. The guards move slowly. You follow with your lantern. After several minutes, the passage turns and enters a small room. Inside are several wooden crates. The guards open them. Most are empty. One contains pieces of cloth. Another contains small metal tools. A third contains several sealed jars. Nobody knows what is inside them. One guard opens a jar carefully and smells it. He says it contains some kind of oil. The master looks around the room. There are signs that someone has been using it recently. Fresh candle wax is stuck to the wall. A small piece of bread lies on the floor. There is even a warm patch of ash in an old fire pit. Whoever used this room cannot be far away. The guards become alert. They inspect the side passages. One passage leads upward. Another descends deeper underground. The master tells you to remain near the chamber. You begin inspecting the walls. You notice that some stones have been removed and replaced recently. Behind one section is a narrow cavity. Inside you find a small leather pouch. You call the master. He opens it and finds several coins. They are not ordinary market coins. Some are foreign. The guards immediately become interested. They say this may be connected to smuggling. You realize that the hidden tunnels may have been used to move goods without passing through the town gates. The thought makes you uneasy. You have spent years working beneath the streets without realizing that other people were using the same darkness for completely different reasons. The guards continue deeper into the passage. You follow. The tunnel eventually reaches a large underground room. There are wooden tables, broken barrels, and several old crates. Someone has clearly used the place as a storage area. On one table is a collection of tools. Some are covered with dirt. Others appear recently used. There is a small lantern with fresh oil inside. The flame has been extinguished recently. One of the guards touches it and says that whoever was here probably left not long ago. You hear a sound from the passage behind you. Everyone turns. Nothing. Then the sound comes again. Footsteps. This time there is no doubt. The 12th day begins in complete silence. There is no rain against the roof, no strong wind, no shouting from the street, only the faint sound of a distant bell announcing the beginning of another morning. You wake slowly, and for a few moments you do not remember where you are. Then the pain in your shoulder reminds you. Your body is exhausted, your hands are covered in small cuts, and every part of you seems to be asking for rest. But this is the 12th day, and you know there will be no real rest until the work is finished. You dress quietly, eat the last piece of bread left from yesterday, wrap your hand, and step outside. The town looks peaceful in the early morning light. Smoke rises from chimneys. A few merchants are already opening their stalls. People walk toward the market carrying baskets. Nobody looking at the streets would imagine the hidden network beneath them. Nobody would imagine the workers preparing to descend into that darkness again. When you reach the work yard, the master is waiting with the entire crew. He looks more serious than usual. He tells everyone that the town officials have decided to inspect the deepest section of the old drainage network. The recent floods, collapses, and discovery of the hidden passage have convinced them that something is seriously wrong beneath the town. There is a large underground chamber that has not been entered for many years. According to old records, it was once connected to several major drainage routes, but the entrance was sealed after a collapse. The officials want to know whether the chamber is still structurally safe. If it is not, they fear another section of the town could collapse. The master tells everyone that this will be the most dangerous inspection they have ever attempted. You immediately understand why. If the chamber has been sealed for years, nobody knows what condition it is in. The air could be bad. The supports could be rotten. The floor could be unstable. There could be water trapped behind the walls. You are given extra ropes, fresh lanterns, wooden supports, hammers, hooks, and several pieces of food. The master also tells everyone that if the chamber becomes too dangerous, they will leave immediately. No amount of pressure from the officials will change that. You begin walking toward the oldest part of the town. The streets become narrower as you move. Many buildings here are centuries old. Some walls are leaning. Some roofs have been repaired so many times that nobody knows what the original structure looked like. You pass beneath an old stone arch and enter a small courtyard behind a church. The master stops beside a stone staircase leading downward. The staircase has been partially buried by dirt and rubble. According to the records, this is the old maintenance entrance. Nobody has used it in years. Workers begin removing the debris. Stone by stone, the entrance is uncovered. The air coming from below is cold and still. You look into the darkness. It feels different from the usual drainage tunnels. There is no smell of flowing water, no sound of rats, no dripping, just silence. The master lights a lantern and lowers it into the opening. The flame remains steady. That is a good sign. He orders the crew to descend. You go second. The stairs are slippery and uneven. Some stones move beneath your boots. You hold the wall with one hand and the rope with the other. After several meters, the staircase ends. You step onto a flat stone floor. The tunnel ahead is wider than anything you have entered before. The walls are made of large blocks of stone, carefully fitted together. The ceiling is high enough for you to stand upright. You raise your lantern and look around. The chamber entrance appears surprisingly well preserved. The master tells everyone to inspect the walls before moving deeper. You walk slowly along one side. There are cracks, but none appear immediately dangerous. You find several old wooden supports covered in dust. They are almost completely rotten. The master orders them replaced before anyone goes farther. The crew begins positioning new beams. The work is difficult because the chamber is enormous. It feels less like a drainage tunnel and more like an underground hall. There are several openings along the walls. Some contain water. Others are completely dry. You begin to wonder why such a large structure was built beneath the town. The master explains that old drainage systems were often designed to collect water from several districts at once. This chamber may have been the central point where water was redirected toward the river. You continue forward. The floor slopes downward slightly. At the bottom, you find a large channel carrying a slow stream of water. It is surprisingly clean compared with the smaller drains. You follow it for several meters until it disappears beneath a stone wall. The master inspects the wall and finds that several stones have shifted. He tells you to mark the area. If the wall fails, water could flood the chamber. You place a wooden marker beside it. Then you hear something, a faint sound from the far side of the chamber. It is almost impossible to identify. You stop. The other workers stop too. The master raises his lantern. Everyone listens. Nothing. Then the sound comes again. A soft metallic noise, like something being dragged across stone. The guards who accompanied the crew yesterday are not here today. The master tells everyone to stay together. You move toward the sound. It seems to come from a narrow passage near the back wall. You approach carefully. The passage is partly blocked by rubble. You shine the lantern into it. There are fresh marks in the dust. Someone has moved through here recently. The master looks at you. You both understand what this means. The hidden passage discovered yesterday may connect to this chamber. You begin removing the loose stones. After several minutes, the opening is large enough to enter. The master goes first. You follow. The passage is extremely old. The walls are dry and covered in dust. Unlike the drainage system, there is no water here. The floor is marked by footprints. Some are old. One set is fresh. The same boot pattern you saw before. You follow the tracks. They lead deeper into the passage. Nobody speaks. The master signals for silence. You walk slowly. After several turns, the passage opens into a small room. There is a wooden table against one wall. On it are several objects. Fresh bread, a knife, a small lantern, a leather pouch. Someone has been using this place recently. The master does not touch anything. He tells you to inspect the walls. You find a small opening behind a loose stone. Inside is a bundle of papers wrapped in cloth. The master takes them carefully. They appear to be records of goods, dates, and locations. You cannot understand all of the writing, but several names and symbols are visible. The master realizes that these may be smuggling records. The hidden tunnels are being used to move goods into the town without passing through the gates. Before anyone can say more, you hear footsteps. They are coming from the passage behind you. Everyone freezes. The master extinguishes the lantern. Darkness fills the room. You press yourself against the wall. The footsteps approach slowly. You can hear someone breathing. Then the footsteps stop directly outside the room. You hold your breath. A shadow passes across the entrance. Someone is there. You grip your hook tightly. The person steps inside. You cannot see their face. The room is almost completely dark. Then the person turns and runs. The master lights the lantern. You follow him into the passage. The figure disappears around the corner. You hear rapid footsteps echoing through the tunnel. You run after them despite your aching shoulder. The passage slopes downward. You nearly slip but catch yourself against the wall. The footsteps become louder